Good morning, Bucknutters. It is Thursday, August 27th, 2015. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning 5 and Change, joined as always on Thursdays by Steve Wiltfong, Director of Recruiting from 24/7 Sports. Steve, how are you this fine morning?
Good morning, Daniel. Doing great. Excited to be on.
We would be remiss if we would not first address what happened in practice yesterday. Super unfortunate occurrence for Noah Brown, the wide receiver from the New Jersey area. Anybody who's followed anything with the Buckeyes or seen any of the videos out of camp knew that Noah Brown was one of the offensive stars of camp, one of the emerging players on the team who's really going to take on a larger role this year. Suffered a broken leg in practice yesterday. The school has already released a statement that he will have surgery today, for that matter, at Ohio State University Medical Center, and he will miss this season, but is expected to make a complete recovery. Feel terrible for the kid. You've worked your whole life to get to this spot, and the lead item in the boarding house yesterday was on Noah Brown, and I can tell you from putting together the boarding house now and then that we had many items to choose from. So, as you know, Steve, injuries are part of the game, but definitely a tough start for Noah Brown.
Well, it's disappointing to see such a key player go down, but the thing that separates the Buckeyes from many of the other teams in the country is that the teams that are going to win the championship absorb injuries, and it's obviously disappointing and heartbreaking to see this happen to a young man that worked hard and worked his way into the lineup and was going to be a key player in the Buckeyes' potential run to win a second straight title. But Ohio State, they got guys that will be able to step up and help fill this void. Talking to J.T. Barrett at Elite 11 this summer about my man Terry McLaurin in Indy, because I'm from Indianapolis, as most of you know. I specifically asked J.T. about Terry's progression, a selfish question, but, J.T. answered just how talented the whole receiver group was as a whole. So I know that there's able-bodied guys there to step up and help Ohio State absorb that injury as they stay on track for their goals this year.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely interesting for the first game, given the fact now you're down Jalen Marshall, Dontre Wilson, Corey Smith, and now Noah Brown. So if you have Michael Thomas in your college fantasy league, that was a very, very good pick. Speaking of picks, classic segue. Today we thought we'd have a little fun with Steve. We're going to ask Steve to go on the record about stuff even other than recruiting, some predictions for the season. Steve and I sit and talk about what we're going to talk about for the shows, and we realize we've gone over all the current recruits that Ohio State's in the mix for as we've hit kind of a lull here. We'll touch on a little bit of recruiting at the end, but we're going to put Steve on the mark here for his predictions. We're going to go over some conference winners and some awards, so hopefully you have some fun with this. Steve was given a brief time to prepare, so he's not being totally ambushed. All right. Steve, give us your answer to the following questions and maybe a little bit of your mental rationale for getting there. First, the Heisman Trophy winner will be?
I think it's going to be Ezekiel Elliott. I know I'm on an Ohio State show, but I really think Ezekiel's ready to put together a whole season in the same fashion that he played the end of last year. 273 carries, 1,878 yards, 18 touchdowns. He's a complete back now, and just talking to some high school coaches, obviously Urban Meyer made the comment this off-season about how Ezekiel Elliott's the best practice player he's ever had, and that includes a guy named Tim Tebow, who's had legendary practice lore. Talking to a high school coach out of Detroit, and I think I mentioned this recently, maybe last week, but a guy who went to a recent Ohio State practice and just talked about the tenacity Ezekiel Elliott brings to the field as a blocker. I mean, he just competes at a high level, and I really think that he's going to win the Heisman Trophy, and I think Ohio State's going to win every game, and he's going to be a major part of it. And part of winning the Heisman Trophy is personality, in my opinion, and being someone that voters are going to want to root for. and he easily has a great personality and is going to be a guy that voters are going to fall in love with this year.
If they haven't already, he makes a good point. He rushed for over 700 yards just in the 3 playoff games. So if he can get that, plus 200 yards per game average, and I think he's got a real good shot. I picked probably J.T. Barrett, so I guess we're splitting hairs there. Okay, who will be the Big Ten champion? And that would mean who would win the Big Ten championship game?
Well, I think it's going to be Ohio State, but I certainly am not ruling out Michigan State. I think everybody knows what I feel about the Spartans, but I think, you'd be going on a hunch to say Michigan State's going to beat Ohio State in the shoe. There's no evidence to say that that's going to happen right now based on what happened last year and what the teams returned. But, Michigan State's a hell of a football team, and that's going to be a great game, and I think Michigan State and Ohio State will be undefeated going into that game. So I think Michigan State beats Oregon this year in East Lansing. And I love what Michigan State brings. I think Michigan State's got arguably the best front seven in college football. I think they got a pro under center. They're going to be really good on the offensive line. And so they're going to be a good football team. But right now, how can you not pick Ohio State, the defending national champs that returned damn near everybody?
Yeah, I think I heard Mel Kiper ask this question on the radio, and he said, if you pick anybody but Ohio State, you're just trying to be cute, which is fair. I am impressed with Michigan State, and I agree with you. I think their front seven is excellent. Losing Ed Davis in the middle is a big loss for them, but I will say they're more talented. I've said this before. They're more talented in their front four than they've been in the D'Antonio era. I'm not sure they're going to be as good because they've had a lot of workman-like guys up there in the past and pluggers and real effort guys, but they've got studs up there now, and if they can coach those guys the way they coach the rest, that's the most talented unit Ohio State will go up against on either side of the ball this year. Okay.
Dan, I want to add to that.
Dan,
Dan, I'd like to add to that real quick. It's
please do.
Ohio State would not beat Michigan State 10 times in a row. So, I think if they played 10 ball games, Ohio State doesn't go 10-0 against the Spartans. So, in one game, Michigan State can beat Ohio State. So, we'll see. Obviously, I'm picking the Buckeyes, but I think everyone realizes that's a game that could go the other way. When you look at Ohio State's schedule going into the season, that's the one game you look at and say, well, if we're not going to win them all, that's the one we probably don't win.
9-0-1. Just kidding. All right. Final four. Who do you believe will make the Final Four? Obviously, last year, Ohio State overcame Alabama and then beat Oregon, who had beaten Florida State. Who gets back? Who's new?
Well, I think obviously you got Ohio State getting in, Ohio State or Michigan State, because I think
so you think Michigan State's going to be one of the Final Four?
No, I think that they're going to settle it amongst each other, Ohio State and Michigan State, because obviously the winner of that game, the loser's not going to the Big Ten title game, so it's just the way it shakes out. So Ohio State is my pick, but Michigan State would be the other one if it's not the Buckeyes. I think TCU finally gets in. I think that Gary Patterson's had some damn good teams in his career that were overlooked because of the league they played in. But I think that they're going to get in. So I like TCU. I think that I'm going to go with my third team in. This is hard. But my third team in for the playoffs is Alabama. I think that Alabama wins the SEC and they get back in. And then the fourth team, I think it's actually going to be Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame brings back a very NFL-stacked roster at important positions this year. The question mark for them is obviously quarterback and D-line. They have a young but talented and big defensive line. They have a quarterback they're excited about, but he's not as proven, but certainly could certainly break out in the same fashion that J.T. Barrett broke out last year. And then I think Notre Dame's schedule lines up well for them. They play Clemson early in the year. Clemson's going to be very young on defense, and they've already had some injuries. So that's a very winnable game for them. And Georgia Tech is very young on offense outside their quarterback, and they get them early in the year. And I think those would be two teams you don't want to see late in the year, but good to see them early. And then, hey, you got to win games like USC and Stanford to make the playoff, and I think Notre Dame can win those. So those are my 4 playoff teams right now: Notre Dame, Alabama, Ohio State, and TCU.
I think the television networks would be very happy to have Ohio State, Alabama, and Notre Dame in there. They'd probably take TCU. At least you got the Dallas-Fort Worth market there. Who is going to emerge as the champ?
Well, now you're just guessing. I think
I'm pandering to my audience here, actually.
Oh, I think Ohio State's got the best team on paper, but you never know how it's going to flow through the year. I think
why you have picks with experts like you.
The Buckeyes have so much depth that it would take a lot to derail them. If Ezekiel Elliott went down, that would hurt. With Weber already going to miss some time this year, that would be a blow. But even then, they have so much offensive firepower and game-changing speed that they can maneuver guys around and coach around it. I mean, hell, their quarterbacks are some of the best running backs in the Big Ten. So they have that going for them. I just love Ohio State's depth and talent. I mean, and it's hard to repeat. Not many preseason number ones in the AP poll win the title, so I get it, but they're the best team right now, and we'll see how these teams develop over the course of the year. TCU, I'd say, is a threat, and I truly think Michigan State's a top 2 or 3 team right now, so we'll see.
On the recruiting front, we want to touch on this briefly, but anything percolating on the Ohio State side? It does seem like things have calmed down a little bit right now. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think you're just going to go into the fall. Ohio State's got minimal spots left. A lot of the guys they're recruiting are in no rush to decide. They're in on some big-time guys: Antoine Jackson, Jordan Fuller, DeMar Hamlin, to name a few. But no, it's a great class. Obviously, you look at what they've done. It's the number 1 ranked class in the country. Nick Bosa, Jonathan Cooper are the 2 jewels, 2 5-star defensive linemen. So the most important position in college football. When the SEC was winning all those championships in a row, everyone would go on TV and say the difference between the SEC and everybody else was A, depth, and B, defensive line play. And Ohio State's certainly a deep football team, and they continue to stack players at the most important position on the field in D-line with Nick Bosa and Jonathan Cooper. More dynamic playmakers coming to the offense. Really like DeMario McCall, really like Austin Mack. A guy that doesn't get talked about enough, but a guy who I think is going to have a really good career as a Buckeye is Luke Farrell, a very complete tight end. So those are, 3 skill players that I immediately like. And then, you flip over to defense, and we've already talked about Bosa and Cooper and Tuff Borland's going to be a very steady, consistent college football player, just a smart guy that's always around the football.
Things are good in Columbus, and every time we have Steve on, it just kind of reminds us of that. Steve, we appreciate your joining us, stepping a little bit outside recruiting for us here on the BM5 and Change.
No, that was fun. Thank you.